backfill some of the money that we've had to spend to send our guardsmen down to help secure that border. And, you know, you talked about just one leg of the triad. You know, we have a real problem with our nuclear triad, which is the most important deterrent we have to aggression in our arsenal. The Sentinel, which is going to replace the Minuteman III, the ICBMs, is way over budget, behind schedule. These are 1970s missiles that we have got to replace, and we've got to have the money to do it. This reconciliation goes a long way toward that. Our nuclear submarines, which are the most valuable element we have in the triad, we're behind on both the Virginia class and the Columbia class. This puts a lot of money toward getting them caught back up. We just have a lot of elements. You've heard about the Golden Dome, which is really a layered level of defense against attack that we have been needing for a long time. This puts $25 billion against that threat. I can go on and on. There are many threats. I really disagree with the argument that the $150 billion isn't needed. The fact is, this is just the first installment of what we need to start to get our defense back to where it should be so that we deter aggression and stay out of wars.
Mr. Rogers, thank you. I want to be respectful of other people's time. There's an additional $9 billion investment for service member quality of life, $34 billion for shipbuilding, which will be a lot of jobs that we need in this country. The $25 billion for Golden Dome. You know, our nation's defense systems, a lot of those systems are old. They were built to defend us from systems that are significantly slower and significantly larger than the weapons that we face today. And if we do not invest in that defense system, then I'm afraid we're putting ourselves at risk for hypersonics and other weapons that are extremely fast, extremely small. And I appreciate you, Mr. Rogers. I want to say this, Chairman Smith. It's always good to have two members who, for the most part, are able to work together. I appreciate your professionalism on the Armed Services Committee, and this is one we just respectfully disagree on. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our chairs and ranking members for joining us at this extraordinary hour. I also want to welcome our dedicated C-SPAN viewers and rules aficionados. You know who you are. For our special edition of DC After Dark, we're meeting in the dead of night so that House Republicans can try to jam through their disastrous reconciliation bill with zero transparency or scrutiny. This meeting began at 1 a.m. because our Republican colleagues know that a bill this bad can't be exposed to the light of day. 1 a.m. is when you work on bills that you want to hide from the public. Why would they want to hide this bill? This bill is going to enact the biggest cuts to Medicaid, the primary health insurance for nearly a quarter of Americans, in our nation's history. This bill is going to enact the biggest cuts to SNAP, which prevents Americans from going hungry in our nation's history. And this bill is going to enact the biggest tax cuts for billionaires in our nation's history. Not only that, but the Congressional Budget Office has just released analysis showing that this bill is going to result in a wealth transfer, not from the rich to the poor, but from the poor to the rich. It's a bill for which there's still no agreement to guarantee its passage. That's why some of our members here aren't here right now. They're out there trying to cut some more deals with the Speaker in the White House. And these deals aren't just tweaks. But if our colleagues' tweets are to be believed, they're so significant that those deals are going to determine whether or not this bill passes at all. Although if it does pass, it's going to be a strict party line vote. So after months of debate and deliberation in the Republican caucus, certainly not bipartisan debate with Democrats, House Republicans still don't have an agreement. What have you been doing all this time, other than lying about whether or not you were going to cut Medicaid? You've had multiple member meetings with the president, committee markups that went for dozens of hours, and you still haven't ironed out disagreements. Not only is it sloppy, it's disingenuous. We're meeting in the dead of night to consider a terrible bill, and you haven't even drafted or shared some of the most critical parts of the bill. haven't shared them with your Republican colleagues, haven't shared them with the other half of Congress, and most importantly, you haven't shared them with the American people. As the chairwoman acknowledged when she gavelled us in at 1 a.m., if Republicans are able to pass their rule tonight, it will include a magical manager's amendment that will allow them to change the bill before it goes to the House floor, a manager's amendment that none of us have seen, that we won't be able to review or debate or change. And when we do get that magical amendment, it's likely to be dozens of pages long and include significant changes to the underlying text, to make last-minute changes, changes that will move around hundreds of billions of dollars. These deserve transparency, these deserve scrutiny, and these deserve debate. As some Republicans have suggested, y'all should probably go home for the long weekend, collect yourselves, and come back to rules when you actually have an agreement. We're here in the middle of the night, of course, because the Speaker and President are trying to rush this bill through by July 4th, a timeline that doesn't seem plausible even if Republicans manage to jam their BS version of this bill through the House this week. It's clear they don't have the votes. The deadlines are made up just so they can jam the bill before anyone really knows what's in it. And for all your consternation over this or that provision of the bill, no matter what agreement the House reaches after this tortured process, y'all know that the Senate is going to rewrite the bill anyway. Senators, Republican senators, have said this bill is a non-starter. And in addition, since the bill has not yet been finished, we don't have a CBO score, how much this bill will cost. We don't have any score except on prior versions of the bill. All we have are some back-of-the-envelope estimates cobbled together by Republicans in their backdoor meetings. Mr. Roy and Mr. Norman have long been big advocates for making sure that we have a CBO score. So it's hard to believe they're going to think it makes sense to pass a bill that doesn't yet have a CBO score, where hundreds of billions of dollars worth of taxpayers' money is penciled in by staff with a calculator, maybe a slide rule, possibly an abacus, or, are they going to, as seems likely, throw caution to the wind and cave again because the president told them to? Of course, business leaders and economists are calling this bill an economic disaster that will add trillions to our national deficit by extending the tax cuts for billionaires at the expense of American families, just like the 2017 tax cuts did. We've seen this play before. The rich get richer, and the American people, working families, get left holding the bag. It was confirmed by the Congressional Budget Office just a few hours ago with a damning report that shows that this bill is going to increase the deficit likely by $3.8 trillion. It's going to cut billions from Medicaid and SNAP, and it's going to reduce household income for poorest Americans and raise household income for the richest Americans. We can't emphasize enough how insanely rushed this bill is. You're proposing major health care changes that will impact every American, whether they get their health care through Medicaid or Medicare or some other source. The impact of those Medicaid cuts will reverberate throughout our health care system. Cuts to Medicaid will push hospitals, nursing homes, and health clinics into bankruptcy. And when those places close, it's going to be harder for everyone else to get health care. Now, turning to the panel before us, Mr. Arrington, Mr. Boyle, I assume you both saw last week's news that Moody's downgraded the United States credit rating. And I'm sure you've read about it because one of the biggest reasons for the downgrade was extending these unfunded tax cuts for billionaires. Moody's explanation is as follows, and I quote, "If the 2017 TCJA is extended, which is our base case, it will add around $4 trillion to the federal fiscal primary, excluding interest payments, deficit over the next decade. And as a result, we expect federal deficits to widen, reaching nearly 9% of GDP by 2035, up from 6.4% in 2024, driven mainly by increased interest payments on debt, rising entitlement spending, and relatively low revenue generation. We anticipate the federal debt burden will rise to about 134% of GDP by 2035, compared to 98% in 2024. So doesn't it worry any of you on that side of the dais? It certainly seems to be what you've been talking about. It seems like a pretty damning indictment of the fiscal situation the Republicans are putting us in, and one that is going to become worse if they pass this bill. There's also this tidbit from that liberal journal, the Wall Street Journal, earlier this week. And I quote, "Investors sold U.S. government bonds and the dollar on Monday, after Moody's ratings late last week stripped the U.S. of its last AAA credit rating, citing large budget deficits and rising interest costs. Adding to the nerves about America's debt trajectory, the House Budget Committee approved a tax and spending bill Sunday that is projected to add trillions of dollars to that deficit." And another Wall Street Journal article this week was entitled "The Stark Math on the GOP Tax Plan. It doesn't cut the deficit." That article put it this way: the plan won't reduce federal budget deficits and would make America's fiscal hole deeper. While Republicans who vowed to reduce ratings say higher economic growth will fill the gap, budget analysts across the political spectrum have panned the Republican plan, warning that it worsens the U.S. fiscal picture. So there's no way around it. Your math ain't mathing. And the consequences are going to be disastrous for the entire country. Now, as we've been looking at this bill over the last few months, as it has been clear that it was going to require drastic Medicaid cuts, we do have this breaking news this evening that it's also going to impact Medicare. Mr. Boyle, this is a major revelation, and it's exactly why this bill is not ready for prime time, barely ready for the 1 a.m. time. So can you talk about how this is a backdoor cut to Medicare, which is going to cut for seniors, and what's going to happen if the bill passes?
Yes, as CBO showed, because of the deficits that are baked into the Republican bill for billionaires, that would, because of something called the Pay-As-You-Go Act, or PAYGO, that would trigger sequestration of Medicare. And it would, again, according to the Congressional Budget Office, be to the tune of over $500 billion to Medicare, one of the biggest cuts to the program. Indeed, I would say the largest outright cut to the program in American history. There are some who might want to argue and rebut that by saying, well, we'll just go ahead and waive PAYGO. It's actually impossible in reconciliation because it would not meet to the requirements of the Byrd Rule. So you cannot waive PAYGO. These cuts to Medicare will happen if this bill becomes law.
Thank you. That's obviously really concerning. Now, we've talked a little bit already about the fact that there isn't a CBO score for whatever the current version of the bill is, but we also know that there are ongoing negotiations about this bill. One of the things we've heard is that there may be an agreement on this SALT deduction, which has been so concerning to some of the Republican members. Is that agreement with respect to SALT likely to increase the deficit or decrease the deficit?
Well, I mean, obviously, if the SALT cap is raised even further than what was in the bill that was voted out of Ways and Means and passed out of budget when we basically put all of the component parts into one, then basically one of two things would happen. Either the majority would have to find even more cuts in order to pay for the loss of revenue, or you would simply see these deficits increase by even more.
Okay. That's what I thought. Thank you. The prints from Oversight and Financial Services aren't too great either. It's in these committees that our Republican colleagues snuck in some really bad stuff they're hoping will get lost in all the headlines about taxes and Medicaid. I'm really concerned by the Oversight Committee's contributions to this bill because the proposed changes to the federal employees' retirement system amount to a major pay cut for our nation's civil servants. It's a cruel policy. It takes earned compensation away from millions of hardworking people just to make a paltry dent in the staggering cost of their tax giveaways. So I know we're going to talk about the tax cuts later, but this is a multi-trillion-dollar handout to millionaires, billionaires, and Fortune 500 companies. It's the biggest government handout of all time. And to shave some dollars off the cost, Republicans are going to cut 13 million people off their health care, and it's going to force a punitive pay cut on federal employees. Mr. Lynch, I think you said 2.4 million employees. These are the public servants who work for you and me and our families and neighbors all across America, and they often do so for less pay than they would receive in the private sector, not because they're dumb, but because they're committed to public service. They give us tomorrow's weather forecast and tell us whether we need to shelter from tornadoes and floods. They prevent crop blight and the spread of dangerous diseases like bird flu. They make sure that the respirators used by coal miners and surgeons actually work. They make sure our food is safe to eat and our water is safe to drink. And these people whose pay is being so casually cut are FBI agents, Coast Guard employees, and doctors and nurses at VA facilities. So at a time when the FAA is struggling with staffing shortages that are impacting air travel, Republicans are going to make that problem worse by cutting the pay of air traffic controllers. These provisions are an unmitigated mess. I'd like to think that we can all agree, no matter the size or shape of the federal government, it should be effective and responsive to the needs of the American people. It should be able to efficiently carry out these core responsibilities, and the provisions in this bill are undermining our ability to do that. So, Mr. Lynch, can you speak to how the oversight provisions in this bill are going to impact federal employees, including those serving in roles that are critical to our national security, our health, and our transportation safety?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Your reference to the VA is very astute. So in a city like Boston, our VA nurses probably earn between 25 and 30% less than the nurses at the private hospitals, and there are a bunch of them, right? So now what we're seeing happening is that because of the shortage of nurses that occurred after COVID, a lot of nurses just retired. Now they're pulling nurses from the VA. They're leaving the VA and they're going to work because they've got less hours, they got more pay, more benefits. So we're competing now, and you know, this is going to make it much more difficult to retain those nurses. And the ones that have been there a while are the most valuable, right? It takes a while to get a nurse trained up, you know, and fully skilled. It takes a few years, and you know, so that's created a huge shortage in that whole metropolitan area, and that's happening all over the country where nurses are leaving the VA. Doctors in some cases as well, therapists. So we're creating this real shortage at the VA. Our caseload. So right now we have a 250,000 backlog of cases at the VA because we don't have the personnel to respond to that need. So we're really in a crisis. You know, obviously the suicide hotline. We've laid off people there, which is ridiculous because we've got a crisis on our hands right now. So all of this will exacerbate the problem. You've hit on that in your remarks already, but this just amplifies the problem, you know, tenfold with these cuts. They'll be leaving in droves.
Your remarks about the VA are very well taken because I've heard the same thing from the VA facilities in my region, that the staffing cuts and the potential for pay cuts, the standards that are requiring nurses and doctors at the VA to see so many patients that they feel that they are not only not helping the veterans who they're trying to serve, but in some cases, the standard of care is becoming harmful. And under those circumstances, we are starting to see an exodus of doctors and nurses from the VA, which this bill is only going to put on steroids, I'm afraid.
Absolutely.
The financial services print, of course, is no better. What Republicans are trying to do here is deeply alarming. It guts the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I mean, if you want to talk about a bureau that's had a fabulous return on investment, as you mentioned, billions of dollars returned to American consumers. This bill defunds the only federal agency dedicated to making sure consumers aren't getting scammed by credit card companies, payday lenders, mortgage servicers, and shady fintech operators. It's returned over $19 billion, $21 billion, I think you said, to consumers since its founding, and that's money that was stolen or unfairly taken through illegal fees, abusive practices, or deceptive marketing, and the Bureau was able to get it back for American consumers. And now Republicans want to defend it, not because not because it's ineffective, but because it actually works. And we know why. Because the Trump administration has already started dismantling the agency from within. In the last 2 months alone, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau has quietly dropped 9 lawsuits it had brought against companies like Capital One and Rocket Homes. Years of investigation and enforcement work has been tossed in the trash with no accountability and no restitution for consumers. It's also frozen dozens of ongoing investigations, many into companies with long records of abuse. These companies have been accused of everything from improper loan servicing and unfair interest charges to failure to protect sensitive consumer data. And now, thanks to new political leadership handpicked by the Trump White House, those investigations are dead. Investigators can't call witnesses, issue subpoenas, or even talk to company lawyers unless they get direct political approval, and that approval isn't coming. Meanwhile, these very same companies, it's such an amazing coincidence, have given generously to Mr. Trump's campaign and especially his inauguration fund. Meta, the parent company of Facebook under investigation for allegedly misusing consumer financial data, donated $1 million to the inaugural committee. Greenlight, a fintech company accused of misleading families about debit card access, is backed by a Trump-aligned venture capital firm. And Elon Musk, whose company is launching a new mobile payments business, posted "delete the CFPB" on his social media after Trump's election. And of course, we've heard quite a bit about how much he's donated. So this isn't policy, it's payback. This is what happens when you let billionaires and campaign donors write the rules. And now House Republicans are trying to finish the job by defunding the CFPB entirely. So, Ranking Member Waters, can you speak more about this apparent corruption happening at the CFPB?
Well, allow me to say to you, Ms. Scanlon, you aptly described what has been happening with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It is one of the most needed and effective agencies of government that have done everything that you said they've done to assist our consumers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been hated by the Republicans ever since it came into its existence. They have tried to kill it, and we've been in court all the way to the Supreme Court on several issues, and we keep beating them back. But now, Trump and this administration want to cut them, even though we tried to protect them when we created them by having their financing come directly from the feds rather than going through the Appropriations Committee. And they tried to attack that and other ways by which they thought they could get to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're finally coming up with ways by which they think they can do that. But the way that we have been in the courts with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, there still would be alive.
To put people out on the streets, impoverish them, and decimate our local community. That is the reason why I was willing to be up all night and stay here for hours to testify on my community, because we cannot afford this bill. Additionally, as it stands, this bill moves to defund Planned Parenthood, wiping out access to reproductive health care for at least 20,000 Ohioans. With one of my amendments, because I have 8 of them, This section of the bill would be removed, ensuring that Planned Parenthood can continue to provide healthcare access across the United States, including the clinic that is in my district in Akron, Ohio, which, by the way, is the most active clinic in the entire state of Ohio. This reconciliation bill, as it stands, does not improve the lives of people of Ohio's 13th district, or really anywhere in this country. And if the committee were to adopt my amendments, constituents in all of our districts would have more money in their pockets, greater access to health care, and more food on their tables. My third amendment is the Lower Your Taxes Act, which is a bill that I introduced early this year and 2 years ago, and it would love it to be included in the reconciliation bill. This amendment would help families across the nation by making corporations pay their fair share and expanding the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. Additionally, I am offering an amendment to include the earned income tax credit look back, which would allow all taxpayers to use their earned income from previous years for calculating the EITC. People have told us they cannot afford living in the United States and putting more money in people's pockets in order for them to pay for gas and groceries and housing and health care. Madam Chair, I see that my time is coming to an end, and I want to continue to be respectful of your committee, so I won't offer the other two. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before this committee and advocate on behalf of my hometown. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
You may submit your statement for the record. Thank you very much. Mr. Thompson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all the members, Ranking Member McGovern, for being here all day, all night, all morning. And thanks to all of my colleagues who came to testify to ensure that our constituents would have an opportunity to have a little daylight shined on the debate regarding this terrible bill. A bill that adds to our national debt somewhere between $3.4 and $4.3 trillion, and that doesn't include the interest on that debt. Takes health care away from 13.7 million people, and it doesn't make them immune to being ill or injured, it just makes them uninsured. So this is gonna add extra cost in the way of uncompensated care to our hospitals. 9 million people would lose food security, and all of this is to give a big tax cut to people who really don't need one in this environment. Madam Chair, I have a couple of amendments. My first amendment would strike the energy provision and restore the green energy tax credits. The American energy resurgence is at a crossroad, and my Republican colleagues seem eager to take the country down the wrong path. This reckless bill would gut America's clean energy production, raising the energy cost for millions of families and killing hundreds of thousands of good-paying manufacturing jobs. Repealing these clean energy credits would raise electric costs by more than $110 per year per household. That's to all of our constituents in red states and blue states. And despite what my Republican colleagues say, clean energy is the industry of the future. 93% of all new American energy supplied last year came from solar, wind, and battery storage. When we passed the clean energy credit, we deliberately paired supply and demand side incentives. By repealing some of these credits, you put at risk the entire supply chain at a time when the need for energy has never been greater. And just as energy demands dramatically increase with AI and crypto, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are looking to decrease our nation's ability to meet this demand. Repealing these credits also cause economic pain to all American families. Whether my colleagues believe it or not, clean energy is the industry of the future, especially in Republican states and districts. Over 400,000 new clean energy jobs have been created since 2022. More than half are located in Republican districts. And this also disadvantages us at a time when China is trying to dominate the global clean energy supply chain. Shutting off the most impactful tool we have to combat this is absolutely reckless. I would urge all of my colleagues to support this. My second amendment deals with the it would strike the provision that the Republicans stuck in this bill to eliminate the $200 tax on silencers. At a time when Republicans are taking health care away from 3.7 million Americans, food assistance away from 9 million Americans, and child tax credits away from 4.5 million children, it's outrageous that they would spend $1.4 billion to make silencers cheaper. I'm disgusted that the congressional Republicans are spending $1.4 billion to make it harder for victims of mass shooters to know where their shots are coming from when they're trying to run for cover. And it's appalling that their actions will make it more dangerous for law enforcement when they respond to these mass shooters. Madam Chair, silencers kill cops and make it easier for criminals to evade capture, but they do nothing to muffle the devastation that family members feel when they lose a loved one. As a combat veteran, a lifelong hunter and gun owner, I can tell you this provision has nothing at all to do with hearing protection, but it has everything to do with making money for a certain segment of the gun industry. If you're concerned about protecting hearing from gunfire, buy and use earplugs. I urge members to support these two amendments, and this one in particular to restore the tax on silencers and to promote public safety. And I'd like to submit for the record, Madam Chair, a list of data showing where silencers were used in mass shootings to kill cops, to kill kids, to make it more difficult for police to respond and to make our communities less safe.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Without objection.
Thank you.
That will be done. Ms. Simon, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. And what a day it's been, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, allowing me to speak on behalf of my constituents is one of the great honors of my life as a new member of the United States Congress, so thank you. And as you've heard from my Democratic colleagues today, the consequences, the deep, profound consequences of this bill and what the real life consequences will have on families in my district and across this great nation are devastating. My amendments are about 1, protecting access to reproductive health care, and 2, protecting our social safety net and our federal workforce. 1, my amendment focusing on repro health. We all know that Medicaid ensures that millions of Americans, millions of working poor and low-income Americans have access to essential reproductive health care, including postpartum. My amendment would prohibit cuts to reproductive health services, including counseling, birth control, prenatal care, pregnancy, and of course, again, postpartum care. It would do so by requiring that the actuary of CMS certify that the majority's bill would not decrease access to or coverage to any of those things. Mercy, mercy. Don't touch women's reproductive health care. But there's no question in any of our minds on both sides of the aisle that this bill would do exactly that, attacking women. When we talk about the majorities pushing through the largest cuts to Medicaid in United States history, here's what it really means. It means Medicaid now covering 40% of all births in this great nation, including prenatal, including pregnancy care and postpartum. It means that millions of people my God. Cutting Medicaid would mean rolling back progress. The Second Amendment that I presented and that was voted down shamefully by my Republican colleagues in the Oversight Committee, it was an amendment that would protect access to SNAP and support federal employee benefits. Simply put, this Second Amendment says that 1, if the Trump administration cuts SNAP, the budget by even $1, that the provisions in this bill that would cut federal employees' salaries, their pensions, labor protections would immediately expire. I know my time is about to expire, but I want to say one thing. Being a new member of Congress, what has hurt me the most is a woman who was a teen mom who took my daughter on the bus every single day to childcare, and I got support. I then, as a transit-dependent person, once a month took an hour-and-a-half bus to get $26 worth of food stamps, then would go to college, and then my day job, and then pick that baby up and come back again. That baby is an attorney. She passed the
meaning even with flat premiums, patients pay more out of pocket. So this is not just my opinion. An internal analysis from the first Trump administration warned that these changes will cause coverage losses, premium spikes, and significant market disruption. The administration has also admitted that under this rule, 2 million individuals will lose health care coverage in 2026. This rule is a direct attack on the people that the ACA was designed to protect. It targets working families, low-income individuals, and people with chronic conditions. This rule isn't about integrity, it's about exclusion. So no, we shouldn't codify this harmful rule into law. We should stop it. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. The second amendment I'd like to discuss today would strike the section of this bill that repeals and rescinds grant funding for reducing air pollution at schools. And I have to repeat this fact. My second amendment would strike the section of this bill, this Republican bill, that repeals and rescinds grant funding for reducing air pollution at schools. At schools. We have an administration that claims to be promoting an agenda that will make our nation and families healthier. As a father and a legislator, there is nothing more important to me than protecting our nation's children. But the bill we are marking up today does the opposite. When parents send their kids to school, the last thing that they should worry about is the air in their children's classrooms. We know that indoor air pollutants pose serious health risks to children, and air pollution can affect educational outcomes. According to data from Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, whose funding the Trump administration has proposed cutting in half, in a classroom of 30 children, 3 are likely to have asthma. One study found a decline in children's test scores for every increase in particulate matter in their school's air, and air quality at schools tends to be worse indoors than it is outside. So what did Democrats do? We created tools to address this challenge. The IRA authorized a grant program that provides essential funding and technical assistance to improve air quality at schools. It seems straightforward to me, even at this hour, why we need this program. Yet Republicans voted against authorizing it 3 years ago. And every Republican on the Energy and Commerce Committee voted against my amendment in our markup last week. Meanwhile, they are cutting Medicaid for nearly 14 million people, and as I mentioned earlier, dismantling critical agencies that are charged with protecting public health. So I'd like my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to explain to me and the American people, how does this bill make our children healthier? How, in cutting these programs, will our children breathe cleaner air? How does making children sick support American families? This issue should be common sense. It should be bipartisan. It should be easy to vote yes on my amendment that preserves this vital program. I appreciate you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes. Oh, got to do questions. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Mr. McGovern.
Eating a Swedish fish when you.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah, I know you have.
It's going to cost more with tariffs to have the Swedish fish.
But I just want to say to everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. I support all your amendments. I'm proud of all of you for coming to this committee and presenting the amendments you did, because I think they represent our values. And as I said at the beginning of this hearing, the underlying bill it doesn't represent my values, doesn't represent our values. And so whatever we can do to help advance your amendments, we will do. But thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Scanlon?
Yes, I echo the ranking member's remarks, and I wanted to particularly thank Representative Sanchez for bringing forward that amendment that is just so despicable in clawing back benefits from children based on who their parents are. It's un-American. That's all I can say.
It also violates the Constitution.
Details.
But that doesn't seem to bother certain members.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the amendment. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Ms. Ledger Fernandez.
Thank you very much. And, I noted, Representative Ricardo, that you kind of said something that we are all hearing, right? We keep hearing from Republicans that they don't like this bill. They whisper it to us. They complain about it. But they are so terrified of Trump that they are not having the courage to actually vote no. But we'll see. We'll see. But, with regards to the amendments proposed with regards to immigration, I just wanted to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record an article in Defense One, and Defense One, as you know, is a highly regarded military publication, titled Immigrants Show Greater Willingness to Join the Military, Study Shows.
Without objection, so ordered.
And another article, I think that goes to Representative Sanchez's points, and there's lots of these different articles, but really the point was made by you, it's been made in some of the earlier panels, but we haven't talked enough about it, and so that's why I wanted to, I know we're trying to move on, but I wanted to take some time to acknowledge that this idea that immigrants are the reason you have to cut Medicaid for everybody because they are somehow gaming the system when they do not receive any federal dollars. And indeed, the article that I would seek unanimous consent to is just one of many that center on budget and policy priorities. Immigrants contribute greatly to the Social Security Trust Fund solvency, which demonstrates, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent.
What was the date? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
The date on
It's
the
an
article?
article.
The date of the article on April 23, 2025.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. And thank you for helping clarify that, because I think it's really important that these are recent articles, because they are showing that immigrants' contributions are key. And this one shows that if it weren't for immigrants who pay taxes, but often don't receive any of the benefits, our Social Security would be in deeper trouble than it already is. And you look at that across the board over and over. And so I'm going to introduce these articles, and I know we want to move forward because we have all these wonderful members who are coming here to tell us all the other new things. This is the great thing about these hearings is we're hearing all of these unique factors that you are all bringing to the fact that we are ignoring our cybersecurity. He got rid of Trump. Trump got rid of. Right? I mean, you're laughing because I don't even have to say it, right? Because it's shameful that we have made ourselves more at risk because of what he has done in terms of opening up our vulnerabilities to Russia. That's one of your concerns, correct, Representative Matsui? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much for raising those. I didn't know if you wanted to do anything else quickly on either of those.
If I could just respond, it is the biggest lie in the world that immigrants take more from the system than they pay in. Immigrants pay into the system, they work hard, they pay taxes, they're not even eligible for those benefits. And yet other Americans are told the reason why there's waste, fraud, and abuse is because of immigrants. It's patently false. It's lies, and it's meant to divide our country. And so the amendments that I'm introducing are trying to strike those provisions that treat immigrants unfairly, immigrants who pay into the system and are not eligible for the benefits.
Yeah, and in this article from Defense One, it's interesting, the articles you start reading, once you get to Congress, like who knew I would start reading military articles? But, that U.S. are more willing to fight for their country. And what they're fighting for, as it goes in to discuss, is the ideals of the country, the ideals of the Constitution. And that is something that I think we need to remember, that we're dealing with a tax bill and cutting essential benefits, but they are wrapping it around elements that are undermining the ideals of this country as a place where we create opportunity for everybody, whether you're native born from West Virginia or you're an immigrant or married in. I would only suggest that, and maybe I could discuss it with you later, the idea that it should be any family who is not just the spouse, but also the children who are married into the military. But with that, you wanted to say something?
I just want to just join my colleague, Congresswoman Matsui, to your point about cybersecurity. I mean, this is, when I was on Homeland Security on the cybersecurity subcommittee, this was something that had bipartisan support. And this is something that we should all be in agreement on.
Yeah.
We're watching an administration dismantle CISA and our cybersecurity workforce at a time that we need to be growing it. And instead of having a strong federal response to all the attacks that we're seeing both in private and public sector to our critical infrastructure, we're saying that the states and municipalities have to handle it when they don't have the resources to. And so I appreciate Congresswoman Matsui's leadership on this issue and her amendment, because it is something that should have bipartisan support, because it has historically had bipartisan support, because it's an issue of national security. And the fact that we can't agree on this amendment, that everyone in the administration, especially when you're enabling people from DOJ to have access to some of the most sensitive personal data of all Americans, right, from red and blue states across the country, whether it's HUD or the VA or the IRS, we should have some level of cybersecurity awareness and training for those individuals. So I thank the Congresswoman for her leadership on this issue, and it should be something that should have bipartisan support, and I thank you for raising it as well.
Thank you very much. And once again, we aren't hearing any Republicans complain about any of the kind of transgressions that would have normally had an outcry, a bipartisan outcry. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now I recognize Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there are legitimate differences of opinion on different issues. Many of my friends are Democrats. I travel with them overseas. We have different ideas about how to solve the same problem. So there are legitimate questions, differences about how we would handle the issues. But I can tell you, as someone who's in the rooms where there are no telephones, where we're dealing with the cybersecurity-related issues, there's no breakdown on the cybersecurity right now. There's just not. So we can have our debates and our differences of opinion, but I can tell you this. The administration is committed on cybersecurity, just as I believe the previous administration was committed on cybersecurity. And it's just a we have differences of agreements on other things, but that's the one that I've listened to that I think that accusation is just, as someone who's in the room, I very much think that's a false accusation.
Can I comment on
Mr.
that?
Chair, I yield the remainder of my time. I'm not interested in a debate on it.
Gentleman has yielded back, and I understand we can do this, but I'm looking at possibly 2 more panels before we finish, and so happy for y'all to have a conversation and discussion and disagreement, but this panel is concluded. Thank you. I note this response will be noted. Thank you. Now, what we've been trying to do is when I start calling off the names for the next panel, it'll be starting on this end with chair number 1, Mr. Khanna, Ms. McClellan, Mr. Courtney, Mr. Frost, Ms. Brownlee, Mr. Magaziner, Mr. Garamendi, and Ms. Elfrith. All right, I know it's still a little busy, but if we can go ahead and get started. Mr. Khanna of California, are you ready? He's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a common sense bipartisan amendment. No American child under the age of 18 should lose their health care because of this bill. As you know, 42% of America's children rely on Medicaid. The chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee said, no one is going to lose their health care. No kids are going to lose their health care. President Trump keeps saying it's all about waste, fraud, and abuse. We're just going after waste, fraud, and abuse. Representative Crenshaw says no kids are going to lose their health insurance. And a number of Republicans wrote in a letter to the Speaker that they should make sure no kids lose their health insurance. But the reality is, independent estimates are that 800,000 kids in this country are going to lose their health care. I think we can all agree that any child born in America should have health care. So if the Republicans agree that kids shouldn't lose health care, why not just have a simple amendment in this bill saying we guarantee that no kid is going to lose health care? Now you ask, why is it that kids are going to lose health care? Why the estimates of 800,000? The reality is that the work requirements were tried in Arkansas. And what they saw is when parents were kicked off health care because of bureaucratic reasons, the kids lost the health care too. It's not theoretical. Thousands of kids in Arkansas lost their health care. And this to me seems like the easiest way that we can answer this question. Just guarantee to the American public that not a single American kid is going to lose health care with this bill. And that would answer the question. It would make good on all of the promises. It would make good on the promise that Trump is saying it's only waste, fraud, and abuse. He certainly doesn't want to deprive American kids born here of health care. Let me end with this point. I was in Allentown. There was a 6th grader. She stood up and she said her name was Sophia. I won't say her last name, but her name was Sophia. And she said, I'm scared. I'm scared. Can you assure me that I won't be afraid? And she said she's afraid because her grandmother is on Medicare. And she said she's afraid because she's a single mother is raising her. And she was concerned about her own health care. I want this amendment to pass so I can tell Sophia she doesn't have to be afraid about losing her own health care. And kids like Sophia should not be afraid of losing their health care across this country.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields back. And now recognize the gentlelady from Virginia, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member McGovern for allowing further amendments to this bill. I think so. Okay. My amendment would ensure that the proceeds of any spectrum licensing, allocation, or auction won't line the pockets of the president, a special government official, any other government official, or their families. It would also ensure that the FCC does not collude with the president or any other government official or their family to influence the outcomes of their personal legal battles. But spoiler alert, this amendment's probably not going to pass. So I want to take the rest of my time to talk about this big bad billionaire bonus that benefits the wealthiest 10% of Americans at the expense of the poorest 10%. It shifts costs to states that are already struggling to fill massive holes that they are seeing from the Trump administration's funding freezes. They are trying to take on the burden of more responsibility shifted to them, whether from the Department of Education or these new work requirements, or now to pay for nutrition benefits for the first time ever. States are going to be left in the untenable position of having to raise their own taxes or gutting even more services as a result. This bill does nothing to address the underlying costs of health care, child care, groceries, energy bills, or anything else. And why are we rushing through this bill to the point where the bulk of it is being discussed in the middle of the night while everybody else is sleeping? What is the rush? Are the wealthiest few in that big of a hurry to get richer? Is there a flash sale on yachts that I don't know about? We've had these markups in the middle of the night that include provisions that Republicans didn't even know about. Like the Republicans on the Energy and Commerce Committee who were caught off guard by the Medicaid provisions imposing copays of up to $35 on an individual who earns up to $300 a week. They didn't know that if somebody was kicked off of Medicaid because they couldn't meet burdensome work paper requirements to prove that they're working, like the 18,000 Arkansas individuals who were kicked off when they couldn't meet work requirements even though they were working, these folks that get kicked off wouldn't be eligible for subsidies to purchase marketplace plans that they otherwise couldn't afford. And that came as a surprise to my colleagues in the E&C committee in the middle of the night. And somewhere between the E&C marathon markup and here, a provision was added that would cut the federal match for Medicaid in states that dare to provide health care to lawfully present immigrants. That means that Virginia, that covers lawfully present pregnant women and children, could face a cut in the federal match that would trigger an unwinding of Medicaid expansion that would cost hundreds of thousands of Virginians their health insurance, put our providers, especially our rural hospitals, at risk of closing their doors. Now I heard there'll be at least one manager's amendment that might fix that. But who knows? Who knows what will happen once the Freedom Caucus, I think they've already returned from the White House, but who knows what they've demanded and what they've gotten. And they want to kick even more people off of their health insurance. But what else is buried in this bill? What's going to be buried in the manager's amendment? What's going to be buried in the bill that we see for the first time on the floor that we won't have time to take back to stakeholders or the American people? And will this be another one of those moments where we rush through a big, massive bill and then hope that the Senate saves the House from its worst impulse? Plain and simple, I ask again, what's the rush? What is the rush of a bill that will harm children? That will say to a family, now even though you legally cannot leave your child at home when they're 7, 8, 9, 10, we're going to assume that you can go to work once they reach 7. Even though I can tell you when my son was 7, if left at home to take care of himself, he probably would have burned the house down. Have we thought through? Have we thought through the unintended consequences of some of the provisions that are buried in this bill, surprising even Republicans that don't like them? I hope we take our time, we do this right, because if we mess it up, the harm is not going to be to us. It's going to be to the most vulnerable that we represent. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize Mr. Courtney of Connecticut for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member McGovern and all the members of the panel. I have a simple, straightforward amendment focused on the Air Force One program, which falls under the jurisdiction of the Sea Power and Projection Forces Subcommittee of the House Armed Services, on which I serve as ranking member. This amendment would prohibit funds made available by this act from being used for the purpose of modifying an aircraft acquired from a foreign source for use as executive airlift aircraft or for transferring such aircraft to a non-governmental entity such as a museum. This provision is in response to the President's sudden decision to accept a Boeing 747 from Qatar to serve as a so-called bridge replacement for the current Air Force One aircraft. The White House has portrayed this idea as a free Air Force One plane. Nothing could be further from the truth. I can say this with complete certainty because in 2018, during the first Trump administration, Congress authorized the purchase of 2 Boeing 747 aircraft that Boeing had originally built as commercial passenger planes for an airline that went bankrupt. The cost of upgrades and retrofitting for these 2 planes to replace the Air Force One fleet totaled $3.9 billion. The work included stripping the plane's interior down to the studs, hardening the plane's defenses, installing encrypted communications technology, and building out space for what is essentially a flying command and control center, not just for our nation's military and intelligence agency, but for the entire federal government. Earlier this month, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Darlene Costello, testified before our subcommittee that Boeing has a workable plan for the Air Force to deliver these 2 planes by 2027. It's important to note that the final cost at this point has already exceeded $3.9 billion to the tune of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of cost overruns. A few hours ago, the White House confirmed that the President has unilaterally accepted a 3rd plane. We've all seen the pictures of this aircraft that is not even close to being ready to fly as Air Force One. And clearly, it's going to require much of the same time and expense to be stripped down and upgraded as the 2 jets already under contract with the Air Force, which are on track for delivery during the President's current term. This scheme was not free, and the new scheme is not going to be free either. It's going to cost the taxpayers a lot of money. The relevance to this reconciliation package is that the armed services provisions, the $150 billion for the Department of Defense, was allocated under Title II of the U.S. Code, which has little or no controls on how funds are going to be used across programs, unlike Title 31, which safeguards the execution of congressional appropriations. And again, during the markup, we had a lot of back and forth with committee staff about the fact that the Office of Management and Budget is going to be basically free to spend that $150 billion with little or no controls or restraint. And we know that this budget director from the first Trump administration was brazenly reprogramming money with no congressional authorization over and over again. Madam Chair, there are a host of other reasons for Congress to approve this amendment, particularly the constitutional prohibition in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, that bars any official from accepting gifts or emoluments from another government without approval of Congress. Obviously, Congress has not even come close to approving this gift. That prohibition, as well as the significant cost of retrofitting a third Air Force One, screams out for Congress to exercise its constitutional duty and put the brakes on this scheme. My amendment will do that, and I respectfully ask my colleagues to make it in order. And Madam Chair, I have an article from Forbes magazine, hardly a Democratic media outlet, titled "Why the Qataris Are Happy to Dump Their 747 on Trump," dated May 15th.
Without objection.
Thank you. I
It'll be
yield
made a
back.
part of the record. Okay, I'm just going by the list given to me, so but if you want to go in order yourself, you're fine. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. Thank you for spending nearly 20 hours at this hard work. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure everybody on this panel does, discussing many of the very concerning cuts and policy implications of this bill, staring down policies that will result in as many as 14 million people losing their health insurance and food assistance, the elimination of IRA provisions aimed at lowering energy costs, adding trillions of dollars to the deficit, which we only just found out a few hours ago from CBO, which will trigger $500 billion in Medicare cuts, all to pay for tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans and corporations. I'm here to request the committee accept the following 2 amendments aimed at protecting our national security, Amendment 102 and 108. First, Amendment 102 is a common sense provision recommended by the DoD itself to protect our national security and ensure military readiness when considering coastal leases for sale. The bill before us proposes a fire sale on public lands and waters to the lowest bidders for the purpose of more drilling, and yet offers no guarantee that any of those resources will benefit Americans or lower energy costs. On the House Natural Resources Committee, we often talk about national security and how our ability to produce our own energy allows us not to rely on foreign adversaries, but selling off our coastal waters surrounding our military installations directly contradicts these efforts and instead endangers our national security by prohibiting the military's ability to train and navigate freely. And here's how I know this, because in 2015, the DoD analyzed every offshore drilling block in their roles and activities critical for military readiness and national security, and they determined that what, if any, level of drilling activity can be done without impeding their critical work. My amendment would require the federal government to implement the findings of this DoD report when selling offshore drilling leases for coastal waters. Due to the sensitive training and work of it at our installations, all of these blocks on the east and west coasts were classified by DoD as requiring either a total prohibition or very specific conditions for leasing. But even if everything on these drilling sites were to go exactly as planned, the mere presence of these rigs would cause immediate threats to our military readiness and national security, and that's just not a risk we should be willing to take. I implore this committee to address the very real threat by supporting this amendment. My second amendment before you, Amendment 180, as was just discussed by my colleague, we understand the bill provides extra $150 billion to the DoD, and frankly, I don't trust the Secretary with $150, let alone $150 billion. But my second amendment, preservation of historical items, is very simple. It prohibits the DoD from spending any of these funds until a panel of experts reviews all artifacts and documents flagged for destruction and censorship. Earlier this year, the DoD, under the direction of Secretary Hegseth, began removing books, images, and stories of historical events and heroes from our military academies. The department removed these items as part of a crusade against what they consider promoting, quote, divisive concepts. Yet protecting the history and accurately telling the stories of our nation is critical to our national security. It's concerning that under Secretary Hegseth's guidance, the DoD has removed images and stories often by mistake. We all read the headlines of articles and images highlighting the accomplishments of the Navajo code talkers who fought in the Pacific Island campaign that were removed. Pictures of the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the atomic bomb in Japan, were removed because of the word gay. At the U.S. Naval Academy in my own district, we've seen nearly 400 books from their libraries removed that explored themes of gender, race, and diversity. Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings was removed, yet Hitler's Mein Kampf and Mussolini's The Doctrine of Fascism remain. We are spending precious time, energy, and resources on erasing the history of our great nation instead of preparing for the next conflict or taking seriously the handling of sensitive national security information. A military that looks like our country and receives an education that teaches the accurate history of this nation is critical to our ability to influence strong democratic principles abroad. If our service members don't learn from history, they are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. I urge support for both of these amendments and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Elfreth. Mr. Frost, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. I got here at 1 a.m., and when I pulled up, I was surprised to see a crowd of about 150, maybe 175 people right outside the Capitol steps protesting this bill and protesting cuts to Medicaid, protesting cuts to food assistance. And I started walking around and speaking with people, and I found folks who were here from all across the nation, of all different ages, all different ethnicities, races, religions. I met Democrats, I met Republicans, I met independents, I met people who aren't registered to vote. And the word I heard from people the most, especially, it started to rain, we stayed out there talking to people, the word I heard the most was betrayal. And people felt betrayed. And a lot of these folks had already planned this trip to D.C. for a long time. They didn't even know that this vote would go on. But when they found out that the Republican majority would be hosting a key hearing on this budget, which the budget shows the morals of a nation and the character of a nation, and they heard it was happening at 1 a.m. in the middle of the night, these people in the middle of their vacation, their advocacy trips on other things and all this, decided to come out in the rain with their families to say, we don't want to be betrayed. We want our health care. We want the nutritional assistance. We want a budget that reflects the values of this country. And we don't want a bill that will facilitate the single largest transfer of wealth from the working poor and the working class to the ultra wealthy in the history of our nation. It's dark and twisted that many Republican politicians want to take away health care, make food more expensive, restrict the child tax credit, all to enrich billionaires and mega corporations. If this bill passes, kids will go hungry. If this bill passes, people will die. And I heard this directly from people that were out there protesting, talking about the impacts that these cuts to Medicaid would have on their lives and their children. I also know this bill's unpopular because I've been traveling this country, going to Republican districts and speaking with constituents who have a Republican representative who refuses to host the town hall. I was actually in Michigan because in Representative John James' districts, one of his constituents shared, quote, "My daughter's a young woman who was born with cerebral palsy, mild cognitive impairments, and autism. She depends on Medicaid services for her health, safety, and well-being. She's unable to work or take care of herself. Without Medicaid, she is totally at risk. Cutting Medicaid to give tax cuts to wealthy billionaires is not only cruel and unethical, but it puts vulnerable people like my daughter at risk of severe mental and physical health problems." I'm in this hearing to offer support for Democratic amendments that would reverse the damage of this horrible bill that's a scam, and I personally have 2 amendments that I would like you to consider. One of them, the first prevents the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform portion of this bill from taking effect if Donald Trump violates a Supreme Court order. The rule of law is fundamental to any functioning country, and the only thing that can guarantee people's safety and security. Without the rule of law, there's chaos, corruption, anarchy. And the president loves to talk about the rule of law, but then he goes on to completely ignore and defy Supreme Court orders that are telling him to do stuff. If any working person at home were to ignore a judge, what would happen to them? No politician is above the law, including Donald Trump. Our democracy and our rights are hanging literally by a thread, in part because Trump has lost over and over again in court because his illegal acts are prohibited by federal judges and by law. And these have been decisions coming from federal judges appointed by both Democrats and Republicans. My other amendment overturns a portion of the bill that eliminates a tax on silencers that has existed since 1934. Republicans want to make it cheaper and easier for the next mass shooter to carry out their plans and kill innocent people. Silencers make it harder for law enforcement to quickly and effectively respond to active shooter situations, since it makes it more difficult to recognize the sound of gunfire and locate the source of the gunshots. This bill is a giveaway to billionaire donors, and apparently also wants to continue to enrich gun manufacturers who want to make even more money and profit even more off of the death of our children and our people. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Mr. Magaziner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here tonight to make ends meet. High costs are impacting everybody. The cost of food, the cost of medicine, the cost of rent. The people I speak to in Rhode Island every day feel like they're working harder and harder, but they cannot afford to keep up. And recently, the Trump administration made it even worse with these reckless tariffs that are making everything even more expensive. But you know who's not struggling? The billionaires, the people at the very top, are doing quite well for themselves. Yet, this Republican tax bill will make it even worse. Under this plan, and listen to this, this is from the nonpartisan CBO. Under this bill, people who make more than $5 million a year will get an extra $100,000 plus on their income.
I mean, truth be told, I mean, this body ought to legislate on this topic, but no one's had the guts to do it. So the states have stepped up, and they have taken this matter into their hands, and that you're going in and basically telling states that what they've done doesn't matter, I think is terrible. So I urge a yes vote on my amendment.
Is there further discussion on Mr. McGovern's amendment?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I agree. Congress needs to legislate on this, but it's not possible to do it at the state level, so I'm opposed to this.
Okay, so
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Scott. The vote is on Mr. McGovern's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
Roll call.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Madam Chair,
Mr. McGovern?
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 202 offered by Representative Ocasio-Cortez which Subtitle A of Title IV shall not go into effect until the Inspector General of the Department of Energy certifies that the implementation of Sections 41002 and 41004 of this subtitle will not result in increased risks of corruption or pay-to-play politics that would adversely impact the integrity of the permitting processes of the Department of Education and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Madam Chair, these unbelievable provisions essentially mean that you can give the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission $10 million and they automatically have to approve your pipeline, or that you can give DOE $1 million and they automatically find that your LNG exports are in the public interest and can move forward. And guess what? Every state and local government no longer has a say. They have to approve your pipeline if you pay $10 million. This is a pay-to-play permitting bribery scheme, plain and simple. And it's becoming all too commonplace in this administration. And so I urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back.
Further discussion. All those in favor of Mr. McGovern's amendment say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Independent chair, the noes have
I
it.
ask for a roll call.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further discussion or amendments?
Madam
Ms.
Chair.
Scanlon, you're recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 374, offered by Representative Mike Thompson, which would strike section 112029, which eliminates the $200 tax on silencers, which has been in place since 1934. Before we proceed to discuss this, can I ask, are any of our colleagues, are you aware of any changes that might have been made in the manager's amendment to this provision regarding silencers? You are. Okay, so you understand that the manager's amendment, which we just got, less than an hour ago, removes silencers from the requirements of the National Firearms Act, which was passed in 1934, and which since that time has required that silencers be subject to a background check and be registered, and up until the time of the underlying bill, also had a $200 registration fee. But all of a sudden, we started this hearing by noting that nobody calls a hearing for 1 o'clock in the morning unless you're trying to hide something. So now we're 21 hours later. We've seen the sun come up, a little cloudy. We've seen the sun go down. So now here we are again in the dark of night, and all of a sudden, there's a magical amendment in the manager's amendment that is going to put more dangerous firearm equipment out on the streets. So here we are. You're sneaking this provision in that not only gets rid of the firearm registration fee for a silencer, but also removes the requirement that they have to be registered at all. Over 400 silencers were found on or traced to violent crime scenes in 2023 alone. So in addition to removing silencers from the definition in the National Firearms Act, there's no discussion of why such
Ma'am,
a
if you
policy
would yield for just a
change would
second.
happen. Also, the removal of the excise tax here is going to cost American taxpayers $1.5 billion. So it's a brazen attempt to make it easier to commit violent crimes. So I think this is sneaky. I think it's a radical policy change with no explanation for why this longstanding federal policy should be overturned in the middle of the night, and I'd urge a yes vote on my amendment. Yes, and I will yield to Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Scott.
It's actually not a silencer, it's a suppressor. It doesn't, it's a suppressor.
I'm sorry, it is still my time. If we look at your manager's amendment, it says that the section is amended by striking any silencer. The
Okay.
whole
Well, then
National
I
Firearms
apologize.
Act-
I don't want to argue with you.
And you can
but-
look up the National Firearms Act. I'm sorry, it's
Okay.
still my time, and I'm yielding to Mr. McGovern.
I would just say, I
Oh,
support.
never mind then. I thought you wanted to engage in a debate, but that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
opposed to it.
I had
Yeah,
yielded to
yeah,
him
yeah.
first.
Of course you are. But I mean, I support the gentlelady's amendment because, quite frankly, what is in this reconciliation bill, does more to support assassins than it does American families. Yeah, well, you know what? Talk to law enforcement. Talk to people who have been victims of gun violence. I know you think it's funny, but I don't. With that, I yield back to the gentlelady.
Any further discussion?
I'll yield back.
I'd like to be recognized, Madam Chair.
Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, and I'm happy to engage in a debate with my colleague. I always enjoy debating with Mr. Scott. The confusion I have about this particular provision, obviously for all the reasons that Ms. Scanlon and Ranking Member McGovern stated, I think this is a dangerous, deeply problematic provision that you all have put into this piece of legislation. The question I have is, this was not in the bill that we were marking up. So whose vote was bought with this provision that silencers will no longer need to be registered with the ATF or subject to background checks, purchasers, that is to say? Like, what member was on the fence about this bill and then went to Republican leadership and said, I know you're eliminating the tax on silencers, but if you can just eliminate all regulation of silencers, I will vote for this bill.
It did not eliminate all regulations of silencers.
Sure.
It's still subject. No, it doesn't.
No.
You don't know anything about this one, brother.
I
know
haven't
this
yielded
one.
to you yet, Mr. Scott.
I have 10 of them.
I haven't
have
yielded
five-
to you yet.
I have 10 plus. I'm not
I
gonna
haven't
say
yielded
any of
to you
mine.
yet, Mr. Scott. So, I'll...
Mr. Neguse has the time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This provision very clearly states that you no longer have to register silencers with the ATF. Is that wrong? Is that incorrect?
That does not mean that you will not go through a background
I
check. It will be
understand.
sold the same way a rifle is.
That's not the question I asked, Mr. Scott. I asked
Don't
whether
yell
this
at me.
provision...
I gave you an answer. You don't like it. It's over with.
This provision very clearly states...
Let Mr. Neguse ask a question and answer it, please, Mr. Scott.
The National Firearm Act, for 100 years, since the days of Al Capone, which is the impetus behind the National Firearm Act in the first instance, has required registration for those purchasing silencers. That was the case up until 45 minutes ago, when Republicans negotiated the elimination of that registration requirement. Fairly straightforward. I don't really know who in the Republican caucus was adamant that this provision was the key to unlocking their support.
And I don't believe anyone here, excuse me for interrupting, but I don't think anybody here knows that either, Mr. Neguse.
Got it. Well, that's helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There we go.
That's a helpful answer.
Let's cut to the chase.
And maybe we might find out on the floor during debate. I mean, hopefully, I guess what I will say, and I'll close here, is that, because I know many of our colleagues are watching as they're waiting to get to the floor for the debate, that perhaps whoever it was that made this request of Speaker Johnson and said, I need this provision so that I can vote for this bill, that they might come to the floor and help explain to the American public why that was.
Maybe we could just follow the money, and that's how we can figure out who did it.
Another way to do it, too.
Thank you.
I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor from Ms. Scanlon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the
I'd
chair,
ask
the
for a
noes
roll
have
call
it. Ms.
vote.
Scanlon requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms.
Madam Chair.
Scanlon, you're recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 27 offered by Representative Johnson, which strikes bill text that would prevent the courts from enforcing a contempt citation against the government for failure to comply with an injunction or a temporary restraining order. As we discussed previously when some of our colleagues were here, certainly Representative Johnson, this is a critical part of separation of powers that the courts be able to effectuate their decisions. So I'd urge a yes vote.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion by Ms. Scanlon say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
No. In the opinion
I'd
of the
ask for a
chair,
roll call vote.
Ms. Scanlon requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 150 offered by myself, which prohibits funds from Title VII, Subtitle A, Immigration Matters, from being used to implement or defend Executive Order 14160 entitled Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship. President Trump has executed a blatantly unconstitutional executive order which purports to revoke the 14th Amendment's guarantee of birthright citizenship, a right that reflects the foundational American value that we don't define our nationhood by bloodlines or parentage, but by our shared democratic values, and therefore no funds under this bill should be used to enforce it. In the U.S., birthright citizenship is guaranteed by the Citizenship Clause in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It was ratified in 1868. The clause, very first sentence in the 14th Amendment, provides that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. On January 20th of this year, President Trump issued a prospective executive order declaring that for certain persons born in the United States, neither the 14th Amendment nor the federal statute incorporating similar language conferred U.S. citizenship. Specifically, this executive order sought to exclude from U.S. citizenship 2 categories of persons whose fathers are not citizens or lawful permanent residents: those whose mothers were unlawfully present in the United States on their date of birth, and those whose mothers were lawfully present in the country at the time of birth, but only on a temporary basis, such as a mother present in the U.S. on a student, work, or tourist visa. A really tortured definition and description of who he intended this executive order to impact. Every court which has looked at this executive order has found it to be unconstitutional and unenforceable. The executive order has been enjoined by 4 different judges appointed by Presidents Reagan, Bush, Obama, and Biden. 2 circuits have agreed to keep the executive order enjoined, and now implementation is pending before the Supreme Court. You know, right-wing extremists have repeatedly failed to convince the public or Congress to end birthright citizenship through legal means, so now they're trying to cheer on from the sidelines as the president tries to change the Constitution without the American people's consent. So I would offer this amendment. It is straight up preventing the use of taxpayer funds to enforce an unconstitutional executive order, and I would yield back.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment by Ms. Scanlon? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
I'd ask for a
Ms.
recorded vote.
Scanlon asked for a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman?
Mr. Norman?
Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms. Scanlon,
Chair.
you're recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 238 offered by Minority Whip Clark, which strikes the section that defunds Planned Parenthood and would reduce access to life-saving cancer screenings and reproductive health care. This bill includes a provision that directly blocks Medicaid patients from receiving care at Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest provider of reproductive health services. Of course, we all know that Medicaid is already not allowed to cover abortions, so this provision is a clear attack on women and their health care writ large. I urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you. You've heard the amendment offered by Ms. Scanlon. Is there any further discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I just want to point out that one of the concerns that the Democrats have is that throughout this bill, there is a constant attack on women's health care. I'll be offering an amendment later about the manager's amendment, but, to not fund the place where women get health care, cancer screenings, pap smears, mammograms, basic care that women need, and Planned Parenthood is often the only place they can get it, especially in rural areas. I would urge you to think about the women in your districts and their need for health care and prioritize that. And for that reason, I support this amendment.
Thank you. You've heard the amendment from Ms. Scanlon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the
I'd ask
noes
for a
have it.
recorded vote.
Ms. Scanlon requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 411 offered by myself, which strikes section 42106, which repeals and rescinds funds to address air pollution in schools. I yield back.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, the vote is on the motion by Ms. Scanlon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Ms. Scanlon requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 71 offered by Representative Raskin, which prevents Title VII from taking effect until the Attorney General certifies that any grant administered by the Office of Justice Programs of the Department of Justice that was terminated after January has been reinstated. Last month, President Trump's Department of Justice abruptly cut hundreds of millions of dollars in grant funding that had previously been awarded to support law enforcement, crime prevention, and public safety programs across the country. Despite broad bipartisan support for these grant programs administered by the Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, and President Trump's repeated promises to the American people that he would prioritize public safety, support victims of crime, and address the opioid crisis, his own Department of Justice abruptly informed more than 300 OJP grantees that their work, quote, no longer effectuated the program goals or agency priorities and does not align with this administration's priorities, end quote. Organizations in at least 37 states across the country lost funding, red states and blue states and urban, suburban, and rural areas, and the work of those organizations, which benefits jurisdictions all across our country, would help ensure that all citizens have access to effective systems of safety and justice, regardless of where they live. The terminated grants totaling an estimated $500 million provided federal support for violence reduction, policing and prosecution, victim services, juvenile justice and child protection, substance use and mental health treatment, corrections and reentry, justice system enhancements, research and evaluation, and other state and local level public safety functions. During the House Judiciary Committee's consideration of the reconciliation bill on April 30th, Ranking Member Raskin and committee Democrats tried to restore that funding. Our Republican colleagues rejected it, but cutting funding for these vital programs threatens public safety, harms victims and survivors of violent crime, and hinders crime prevention efforts. So I urge a yes vote on the amendment, and I yield back.
You've heard the motion by Ms. Scanlon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Ms. Scanlon requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make in order amendment number 35, offered by Representative Jayapal, which prohibits the use of funds in Subtitle A of Title VII from being used by Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain or deport U.S. citizens. The amendment is straightforward. It should be uncontroversial. It would ensure that none of the funds in this bill are used to detain U.S. citizens for immigration enforcement. Reports of U.S. citizens being wrongfully arrested and detained started coming out just days after this administration was sworn in. Some citizens have been detained for merely speaking Spanish. Others were held for days despite consistently telling the Department of Homeland Security that they were citizens. ICE detention of U.S. citizens because of reckless and lawless immigration enforcement is both unconstitutional and dangerous. Even ICE acknowledges that it has no authority to arrest and detain U.S. citizens. Their internal guidance says, as a matter of law, ICE cannot assert its civil immigration enforcement authority to arrest or detain a U.S. citizen. Nevertheless, we've seen detentions of U.S. citizens occur. We've heard about deportation of children, U.S. citizens. So Congress has a duty to act. We have to ensure the government funding, taxpayer dollars, doesn't support illegal or unconstitutional actions. Therefore, I offer this amendment and urge a yes vote. I yield back.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Ms. Scanlon requests a recorded vote.
Mrs.
Clerk
Fishbach?
will call the vote.
No.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had one amendment that I had planned to introduce. The necessity for that amendment has been obviated, but I wonder if I might be recognized for a minute just to explain why, and then I'll hand it off to Ms. Ledger Fernandez. I had intended to offer an amendment with respect to the provision in two provisions within the bill that would have overturned resource management plans in Colorado, and secondly, the land conveyance issue that we had discussed at great length earlier today. Both of those provisions were removed from the underlying bill. And so I want to thank Representative Zinke, who was very adamant in building a coalition necessary to make the case about removing those provisions. I also want to thank Representative Lee, Representative Horsford, and Representative Titus, each of whom were also, as you know, Madam Chair, from their testimony today, very engaged in making the case that this is not a precedent that the committee should adopt. I'm happy to thank Mr. Langworthy as well. I don't know if my Chautauqua references perhaps played a role in that, but in event, I'm sure that put it right over the top, but in any event. So I am glad that that provision is no longer in this larger bill, and so I will not pursue the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. Are there any further amendments? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to offer my first amendment, where I move the committee to add a self-executed second-degree amendment to the manager's amendment, striking the assertion of a new section 44202, which is on page 14 of your manager's amendment, because this would result in at least 300,000 people losing health care coverage. And more importantly, this is the Republicans' attempt to have a national abortion ban. This is their attempt to have a national abortion ban because it would eliminate abortion coverage for marketplace plans or prohibit cost-sharing reduction for plans that maintain abortion coverage. So what you're basically doing is saying if anybody is getting their health coverage through the marketplace, you are putting a disincentive on there so they will not be able to provide abortion. It's a very sneaky amendment in the manager's amendment, but I think we all need to call it out, and so that's why it's the first amendment I am bringing, because that is in effect what it does. And I think that we heard today from Whip Clark about the difficulty of getting reproductive health care, and this is extraordinary in what it would do. And I shared my own personal story, which, given the kind of health care I was undergoing, could have resulted in what might have been considered an abortion, despite the fact that I was just trying to save my life. So these are the kinds of unintended consequences, but this is a very intentional consequence of what's in this bill. And so I urge that Americans understand what's happening here, and that women understand what's happening there in this bill. And it's at the last minute. What, we got it, a couple of hours ago, and they're going to vote on it in a few hours, they've promised us.
Thank you, Ms. Ledger Fernandez. You've heard the motion by Ms. Ledger Fernandez. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion, Chair, the noes have it. Ms. Ledger Fernandez requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
No.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Are there
Madam
further
Chair.
amendments? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're.
Madam Chair, I have amendment to the rule. I move the committee make and order amendment number 47, which is offered by Representative Sykes. Representative Sykes appeared before us and made an impassioned claim as to why we needed to protect Medicaid. And we have heard those on the day say, but this is not really cutting Medicaid. Well, this amendment is your chance to actually vote consistent with some of those statements. So, Madam Chair, I urge a yes vote so that we can actually have a debate on the floor on Representative Sykes' amendment. And I yield back.
You've heard the motion by Ms. Ledger Fernandez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mr. Langworthy? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern? Yes. Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Madam
Any
Chair.
further amendments? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 485 offered by Representative Byer, which strikes the elimination of the electricity investment protection tax credits in order to keep electricity prices low. This reconciliation bill amounts to a full repeal of the clean energy tax credits Democrats established through Inflation Reduction Act. But the thing is, this is a way of lowering costs for American families. According to the Department of Energy, in just the last 10 years, costs have declined significantly for many technologies, including distributed solar, down 26%, land-based wind, down 41%, utility-scale solar, down 73%. What other kind of energy is going down in these kinds of degrees? So the Inflation Reduction Act, the renewable energy, the clean energy that Americans want, it is also saving Americans money. In fact, in New Mexico, where, as you know, I've explained, we also are a fossil fuel producing state, we're developing clean energy power plants, manufacturing facilities, we're creating jobs, we're lowering costs. People want us to keep doing this, but Republicans want to go back in time. You know, I feel like we're in the 19th century, and Republicans are arguing that gas lamps are better than electric light bulbs, and Gesundheit and God bless, Madam Chair. So when Republicans talk about energy dominance, why are they giving up on the energy of the future? If we want to be truly energy dominant and compete in what is expected to be, listen to this, a $2 trillion global clean energy market. If you do not keep these credits in existence, you are basically saying, China, take it all. You lead the world. Well, I don't think we should do that. We have the resources here. Let's vote in favor of the amendment, or at least let our members decide whether they should keep it. With that, Madam Chair, I urge a yes vote and yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Ledger Fernandez. You've heard the motion from Ms. Ledger Fernandez. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Noes have it. Ms. Ledger Fernandez requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Leisure Fernandez.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 483 offered by myself, which protects state budgets in education and healthcare funding from reductions in oil and gas revenues. So basically, what we did in the House Natural Resources is we reduced oil and gas royalty rates. Now, the problem is oil and gas producing states share in the federal royalty rates. So for those states who have federal lands, they're going to be receiving less royalties. And let's look at how this happened. Act 1, Trump promised to scrap climate laws and to do what oil and gas wanted if U.S. oil bosses donated $1 billion to the Trump campaign. Act number 2, Trump starts living up to that promise. He takes aim at city and state climate laws in an executive order. And now act number 3, cuts to oil and gas royalty rates in the budget reconciliation. And they are going to reduce the money flowing to states. And, you know, my colleague across the aisle pointed out that New Mexico does receive oil and gas, but what this would do, and our land commissioner, whose job it is to try to make sure we get as much money off of those oil and gas leases, wrote us a letter in House Natural Resources pointing out that this would be almost a almost a $500 billion hit to our state because of what we will be doing here. So on behalf of my state, of Colorado, of North Dakota, of all of those other states that have oil and gas producing, I urge a yes vote on my amendment, and I yield back.
You've heard the amendment from Ms. Leisure Fernandez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The
A
noes
recorded
have it.
vote.
Ms. Leisure Fernandez requests a recorded vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez?
Aye.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to.
Madam Chair, I would offer as my last amendment, there are so many issues that we heard about today that deserve to have a vote on the floor. The amendments, there used to be a time when I remember we would show up and there'd be votes. You'd have to make decisions. But what happens in rules now is there's never any more amendments. They're all closed rules. But this one I think is really key, and I'm going to offer it as my last amendment because this actually goes to the fact that when we look at that chart that shows that working families, low-income families are going to, they're going to basically, they're going to get a tax hike in essence. They're going to lose out under this bill. But we could change that. We could change that if we struck Section 11004, the extension of the increased child tax credit, and replaced it with H.R. 27633, the American Family Act. And what this would do, this would put the full child tax credit, fully refundable, in the bill. If we care about lifting children out of poverty, making sure that families get to decide, and not only that, making sure that those who earn less get the full child tax credit, so that it's not just the wealthy who are getting the full child tax credit. It makes a lot of sense. And, you know, this is one of those things where you guys just put Trump on the baby bonds. We should have put Biden on the child tax credit that we passed, right? But that's the thing, is we just believe in making a difference for people, not plastering names all over the place. but it was good law when we had it, when the Democrats passed it, and it existed in Biden. We should bring it back. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back. And before I yield back, though,
I have one more amendment.
oh, you're going to do an amendment? Okay. In that case, I yield back.
Thank you. Good. Oh, question on your amendment. Yes. I didn't think you made it. You made an amendment. Right. Thank you. Yes. Okay. All those in favor of Ms. Ledger Fernandez amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
You want a roll call? Roll call.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
No.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman?
Mr. Norman? No.
Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy?
No.
Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith?
No.
Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
The clerk will report the tally.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Mr. McGovern, you recognize.
Madam Chair, I just have another amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 2 offered by Representative Gillen, which strikes the limitation on the state and local tax deduction. But before we vote on this last amendment, I just want to recap some of what just happened here tonight. So Republicans on this committee voted against raising taxes on billionaires, voted against following a House rule that requires a 3/5 vote to raise income taxes, just in case this great, beautiful bill of theirs raises taxes on regular working people, which I think we all believe it does. But they're insulating themselves by basically waiving the 3/5 requirement. And Republicans voted against protecting Medicaid benefits. They voted against protecting SNAP benefits for children. So I guess more children will have to go hungry. And they voted against an amendment to restore NIH funding for critical cancer research and other important medical research. And I think this is all shameful. So these votes basically show us where your priorities and your values are. And as I said at 1 o'clock in the morning, when you vote for this, you own it. And so with that, Madam Chair, I urge a yes vote on my amendment and urge you to call the question.
Okay. You've heard the motion by Mr. McGovern. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Ask for a roll call.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Hearing no further discussion, the question is on the motion from the gentlewoman from Indiana. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
Ask for a roll call.
Mr. McGovern requests a roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
Yes.
Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman, aye. Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Mrs. Houchin, aye. Mr. Langworthy?
Aye.
Mr. Langworthy, aye. Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Griffith?
Aye.
Mr. Griffith, aye. Mr. Jack.
Aye.
Mr. Jack, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Hell no.
Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Scanlon.
No.
Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Neguse. No. Mr. Neguse, no. Ms. Ledger Fernandez. Ms. Ledger Fernandez, no. Madam Chair.
Aye.
Madam Chair, aye.
The clerk will report the total.
8 yeas, 4 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to report is agreed to. Accordingly, the gentlewoman from Indiana, Ms. Houchin, will be managing this rule for the majority.
And I will for the minority. Can I ask just one question? What is the schedule?
We will be going to the floor
Got to do it, right?
right now.
Are we doing just the rule tonight, or are we doing the rule and the bill tonight?
I am not clear, but I believe there's a chance we'll do the bill tonight.
All right.
Okay? So,
Aren't you glad we started at 1 o'clock?
without, usually about 20 minutes.
20, 30 minutes usually.
Right. Right. Without objection, the committee is adjourned.
15 minutes after you hear the bell.
that they were citizens. ICE detention of U.S. citizens because of reckless and lawless immigration enforcement is both unconstitutional and dangerous. Even ICE acknowledges that it has no authority to arrest and detain U.S. citizens. Their internal guidance says, as a matter of law, ICE cannot assert its civil.
CBO spent days and days carefully putting together data about what the previous version of this bill would do. I know it didn't show what you were hoping it would show, but it seems vital for us to get updated data on a bill that is set to rob the middle class in order to pay off the rich. So there is no pressing deadline here. That's what is so puzzling to us. I mean, just your own made-up deadline to pass this bill before Memorial Day. We could do this bill tomorrow or the next day. We could do it when we come back from Memorial Day. So, you know, we should recess and give everyone the time needed to understand these changes. This is a big deal. This is consequential. And that we're moving forward with major changes, and we're just supposed to take, you know, your word for it that, oh, it's no big deal. So, you know what, I move that we adjourn, because we ought to take the time to be able to do this.
Point of order. Motion to adjourn has been made. It's not debatable. No comments after that can be allowed. Madam Chair.
Say that again.
The gentleman made a motion to adjourn and then wanted to explain it, but you can't debate a motion to adjourn, so once the motion's made, all discussion ends.
Yes.
All right. Stop
The
debating every
clerk-
way you can. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. The question
Well, that's
is
the rule,
on-
going back to Parliament.
I get it. Yep, I get it.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Can I ask for a roll call, or am I going to be silenced on that?
You may ask for a roll
I ask for a
call.
roll call. This
The clerk
atrocious
will-
process.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
No.
Ms. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman?
CBO spent days and days carefully putting together data about what the previous version of this bill would do. I know it didn't show what you were hoping it would show, but it seems vital for us to get updated data on a bill that is set to rob the middle class in order to pay off the rich. So there is no pressing deadline here. That's what is so puzzling to us. I mean, just your own made-up deadline to pass this bill before Memorial Day. We could do this bill tomorrow or the next day. We could do it when we come back from Memorial Day. So, you know, we should recess and give everyone the time needed to understand these changes. This is a big deal. This is consequential. And that we're moving forward with major changes, and we're just supposed to take, you know, your word for it that, oh, it's no big deal. So, you know what, I move that we adjourn, because we ought to take the time to be able to do this.
Point of order. Motion to adjourn has been made. It's not debatable. No comments after that can be allowed. Madam Chair.
Say that again.
The gentleman made a motion to adjourn and then wanted to explain it, but you can't debate a motion to adjourn, so once the motion's made, all discussion ends.
Understand. Yes.
All right. Stop
the
debating every
clerk-
way you can. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. The question
Well,
is
that's the rule,
on-
going back to Parliament.
I get it. Yep, I get it.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Can I ask for a roll call, or am I going to be silenced on that?
You may ask for a roll
I ask for a
call.
roll call. This
The clerk
atrocious
will-
process.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach?
No.
Ms. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Ms. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger-Fernandez? Ms. Ledger-Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the tally.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment is not, the motion is not agreed to. Is there further
Yes.
discussion or amendment?
Madam Chairwoman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order amendment number 378 offered by myself, which requires NIH to restore all awarded, unspent, but obligated appropriated NIH grant funding.
You've heard the motion from the ranking member. Is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes
I ask
have
for a
it.
roll call.
The gentleman asked for roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Ms. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Roy? Mrs. Houchin? Ms. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack?
No.
Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Ledger Fernandez? Ms. Ledger Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the tally.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
The noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Is there further discussion
Yes.
on the,
Yeah. I have an amendment to the rule, Madam Chair.
Mr. McGovern, you're
I move the
recognized.
committee strike the final sentence of the rule, which states that Clause 5B of Rule 21, the House rule requiring a supermajority vote to increase income taxes, does not apply to this bill. I mean, we have just spent hours and hours showing that this tax scam will mostly benefit the ultra-wealthy, while it will hurt the lowest earners. We have presented unbiased, nonpartisan analysis from the Joint Committee on Taxation, from the Congressional Budget Office, and from outside experts. And here's one final piece of proof. Republicans have to rig the rules to move their bill forward, even though it increases taxes for many families. And I'll try to explain in plain English. The House rules require a supermajority vote, 3/5, for any bill that increases income taxes. And guess what? Republicans are turning that rule off for this bill. You are turning it off. Not as part of a standard waiver of all points of order, but specifically and intentionally. And why do they have to do that? Because they know that this bill will increase taxes on those families who are struggling the most to put food on the table. And they want to rig the rules so they can pass it with a party line vote anyway, despite the House rule against it. This bill is a Republican scam, and the American people aren't going to fall for it. So I urge a yes vote on my amendment to ensure that we follow the House rules, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Any further discussion? Mr. Neguse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to be heard on the amendment. I support the gentleman's amendment, and I think it begs a larger question with reference to the manager's amendment that we're considering. We've had a very fulsome discussion over the course of the last 20 hours on the bill that was before this committee. We now have, I believe, a 40-some-odd page manager's amendment that's been submitted. Here it is. We just got it. And I know my colleagues seemed very willing to explain the various provisions of the underlying bill. And so I wonder if any of them would be willing to help explain to me the changes in the manager's amendment. If Mr. Scott or Mr. Norman could perhaps give us some clarity about what this manager's amendment attempts to do to the underlying bill. I mean, we just got it. So we're being asked to vote on it. I assume you all, and maybe who we need to have come in to explain it is Mr. Roy. I mean, Mr. Roy has not been in this hearing, I think, for the vast majority of it, the last 20 hours that we've been sitting here. I assume he's negotiating this. So I assume he explained to you what he's now asking you all to vote for. Can someone explain to us what this manager's amendment attempts to do?
Mr. Neguse?
Yes.
I gave you the summary. There's been a lot of discussion about it being a 1,000-page bill, but we all know all of those components were out there for a long time. And so I want to look at a 40-page bill. We all know that that's not 40 pages, 8.5, not a large amount. So much of it is technical. Mr. McGovern said there's not a lot that's technical. I've given you what are the major substantive changes in the bill. We're happy to give you a copy of that, but.
Is that a summary document that you have that you're, yeah, if you could provide that to us, that would be helpful. I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of, and maybe my colleagues on the other side of the aisle already know, where did this bill end up on SALT? Where did it end up with the IRA phase-outs? Where all of the variety of issues that have been, been debated the last couple of days. I just think it's unfortunate that members would have to, find out from online on Twitter.
I can read this to you.
I'm just trying to understand, well, what does it mean to, to strike MAGA and insert Trump? Like, what's that about in the manager's amendment?
I can answer that question, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you don't, hand something like this to people and then rush into a markup. But anyways, if people could explain some of this stuff, that would be helpful.
Who was it that said they could explain the?
Mr. Griffith.
Sure.
If the chairwoman wants me to.
I'm happy to yield a moment from my time.
I'm happy to recognize you, Mr. Griffith.
Yeah, so
It was my time, but I don't.
all of that language was in the original bill, and they were creating this new trust that you would, for a child born in, I think, 4 or 5 year period, I don't remember now if it was a 4-year period or a 5-year period, you could set up a trust. There was all kinds of rules about the qualifications of the trustee. It had to be a bank, et cetera, and the name of the trust originally was going to be the MAGA trust that you set up for the child, and the government was going to put in, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was $1,000 for each child where the family set this up, and they were going to call them MAGA trusts.
And why the name?
The wisdom was to change that to the Trump trusts.
Oh, hell no. You're going to name these accounts?
Why?
So the Cory Booker idea, this was Cory Booker's idea, it's his baby bonds. Now, he was willing to call it baby, but Trump didn't call it.
Can we do this one person at a time, please?
No, you're right.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for that explanation. It's nice to have that clarity, and I suspect those who might be watching online can now understand.
Wow.
So to put a finer point on it, the MAGA baby bonds are now going to be named the Trump baby bonds. That's what Republicans have spent the better part of the last 24 hours negotiating at the White House. Apparently, the president got his way, and these new savings accounts will be named in his honor. It's for all the talk of my colleagues, not treating him like a king. It sure seems like you are attempting to do so. I've never heard of you all would be screaming bloody murder if we named savings accounts after Barack Obama, the new trust accounts for your children and your grandchildren, Obama accounts.
Well, I
would love to see the reaction. But anyway, I will. I'm happy to yield back the balance of my time, and others want to be heard on the amendment. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Scanlon.
Yeah, just with respect to that, instead of the MAGA trust or the Trump trust, why don't we call it the Trump diaper savings? It could be TDS, because I think the only way you end up with a stupid name like this is if you have TDS. So let's call it the Trump diaper savings.
What?
Well, you'd need to offer an amendment to do that, I
don't think it's
believe,
worth any
Ms. Scanlon.
It's not going anywhere.
Do we have a pending amendment?
No, I believe you.
We're on his amendment.
Right, and I'd like to speak to his amendment.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think the reason we're talking about the amendment is
On this vote, the yeas are 211, the nays are 213. The motion is not adopted. The House will be in order. So do I ask now? For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 436, resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 1 to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of House Concurrent Resolution 14.
Jim. Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 436 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 29, House Resolution 436, resolved that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 1 to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of House Concurrent Resolution 14. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. An amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 119-3, modified by the amendment printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution, shall be considered as adopted. The bill as amended shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill as amended are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill as amended and on any further amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 2 hours of debate equally divided among and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Budget or their respective designees, and the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means or their respective designees. And 2, one motion to recommit. Clause 5B of Rule 21 shall not apply to the bill or amendments thereto.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
21, I make a point of order against consideration of the rule House Resolution 436. Clause 9C of Rule 21 of the Rules of the House specifically state that the Rules Committee may not waive the earmark disclosure rule prescribed by paragraphs A or B of Clause 9 of Rule 21. House Resolution 436 states, quote, all points of order against consideration of the bill are waived, end quote. Therefore, I make a point of order pursuant to Clause 9C of Rule 21 that this rule may not be considered.
The gentleman from Massachusetts makes a point of order that the resolution violates Clause 9C of Rule 21. Under Clause 9C of Rule 21, the gentleman from Massachusetts and a member opposed each control 10 minutes of debate on the question of consideration. Following that debate, the chair will put the question of consideration as follows. Will the House now consider the resolution? The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, House Democrats are making a series of procedural motions.
The House will be in order. Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, House Democrats are making a series of procedural motions today to stop the consideration of this lousy, awful, disastrous bill. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. Please take your conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. The gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, we will not stand by and watch Trump and his billionaire friends destroy this country without putting up one hell of a fight. And because this resolution waives the earmark rule, it is not in order for it to be considered on the floor. As I just said, Democrats are not going to sit here and let Republicans jam this bill down the throats of the American people. We are going to fight back, and we are going to fight like hell. Because, Mr. Speaker, this point of order is not just about the fact that this bill has earmarks. Look at who the earmarks are for. Look at who Republicans help and who they hurt. Follow the money. From day one, Trump has demanded that this entire process be about one thing: giveaways to the rich and to the powerful. This bill is a scam, a tax scam designed to steal from you, the American people, and give to Trump's millionaire and billionaire friends. These are the same millionaires and billionaires who write big fat checks to members of Congress. And guess what? They expect a return on their investment. And this bill, this Republican tax scam, is Exhibit A. This is all about corruption, greed, and theft. Theft from the American people. Theft of their hard-earned tax dollars to give Elon and his rich friends. It's 1,000 pages of giveaways to billionaires. And there's so many, I don't even know where to begin. But let's start with the big fat earmarks Republicans have got in here for polluters. Lots of pork for polluters in this bill. We've got corrupt pay-to-play schemes that let polluters buy immunity from lawsuits, cut corners on environmental reviews, and skip the legal permitting process. Did ExxonMobil come up with that one, or was it BP? Nice little giveaway to them tucked into this bill. That's on page 247 and page 600. Or what about the earmarks in here that will allow certain companies to exploit and pollute pristine public lands, including for a coal mine owner with criminal convictions for environmental and safety violations? Did he just text Republicans the language of that earmark, or did they draft it themselves? That's on page 559 for those following along at home. This bill even has a hitman handout. An earmark here gets rid of an excise tax on gun silencers. Who does that? That's page 1024. This has been in place for nearly 100 years and is a vital public safety measure. Over 400 silencers were found on or traced to violent crime scenes in 2023 alone. At least on that earmark, we know who asked for it, the NRA. And we know why Republicans complied, because they want to keep getting big fat checks from the gun lobbyists. I could go on and on and on, but this bill is loaded to the gills with giveaways to lobbyists, earmarks for special interests, and loopholes for the rich so they can get away with dodging their taxes. And with that, I reserve my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purposes does the gentlelady from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to claim time in favor of consideration of the resolution. The question before the House is...
The gentlelady is recognized for 10 minutes.
The question before the House is, should the House now consider H.Res. 436? The resolution before us waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The Committee on the Budget filed its report on May 21st, 2025, which included the following statement from each instructed committee's reports. The committee print does not contain any congressional earmarks, limited tax benefits, or limited tariff benefits as defined in Clause 9 of House Rule 21, and I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I can't believe the Republican argument is just trust us. At this point, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost.
Gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a moment I'm never going to forget, because tonight hundreds of Republican members of Congress are wanting to line up to vote for the biggest transfer of wealth from the working poor and the working class to billionaires and mega corporations that we've seen in this country's history. This is a deep moment of betrayal, a complete absence of loyalty to the people that we represent, and an abandonment of the values of hard work and dignified life. Mr. Speaker, I'm 28 years old. My generation already expects that we'll never be able to afford a home, to get out of debt, to retire, to live comfortably. And no, it's not because we've lived beyond our means, but it's because we've been denied the means to live. Donald Trump and congressional Republicans are making it worse, gutting Medicaid and food assistance to give tax cuts to billionaires and special interests. And all of the things that you could give tax breaks for, this bill will cut taxes on silencers for guns. And for those who don't know, gun silencers can be attached to a gun to muffle the sound of a gunshot. And I'm going to wait till the House is in order, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. Gentleman may continue.
In mass shootings, these silencers make it harder to identify and respond to the source of the gunshots. Earlier, I put forth an amendment to strip this tax cut for the gun lobby, and House Republicans wouldn't even let it come up for a vote. And then the Republicans made the bill worse in their manager's amendment by making silencers completely unregulated. In 2023 alone, the ATF recovered over 400 silencers from violent crime scenes. For this reason, silencers have been highly regulated for nearly 100 years. In May of 2019, the Virginia Beach shooter attached a silencer to his .45 caliber handgun that he used to kill 12 people on 3 floors of a city building. Survivors of the attack said they weren't even aware a mass shooting was going on because of the silencer. My question is, why did this get added to the bill just a couple hours ago? Which congressional Republican just couldn't stand to vote for the horrible bill until it promised even more death to people? And I will yield to hear a name. Mr. Speaker. I'll yield just to hear a name.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
Mr. Speaker, this is supposed to be a challenge because the rule says that we've waived earmarks, but the gentleman is not talking about earmarks. He's talking about process that he doesn't like. He's talking about parts of the bill he doesn't like, but he has not mentioned any specific earmark. Even the gentleman who spoke before him, the gentleman from Massachusetts, only talked in general terms about things that were general policy, not earmarks. So I submit, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that the gentleman is not in order in giving remarks that are not pertinent.
The gentleman from Virginia has not stated a point of order.
I'm sorry?
I reclaim my time. I will yield just to hear the name of the Republican that couldn't vote for this bill.
House will be in order. The gentleman from Virginia has not stated a point of order. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. I am just curious on which Republican couldn't vote for the bill until we completely deregulated silencers. My generation isn't just defined by a bleak financial future. We're also defined as the mass shooting generation. We've done more active shooter drills than fire drills. We've grown up watching classes of our students die a brutal death, helpless inside classrooms, on our blocks, in our churches, again and again and again and again. And so, America, we got to be very clear and truthful about this budget. Laws for gun manufacturers to make more money off of the death of children and our people? Yes. Food for children to eat? No. Healthcare for seniors, disabled Americans, and millions more? No. Resources to help working families fight to ends meet? No. This is why they've been told to not host any town halls back in their districts. That's why this debate is happening in the middle of the night. It's nothing short of theft. And congressional Republicans are really helping me understand why half of this country doesn't vote. It's because they'll look people in the eyes and make promises only to come here in the middle of the night to advance a bill that will take away the benefits that they have earned. Republicans would have us believe that the person most likely to steal from you is a person in a hoodie, a black person in a hoodie, or an immigrant with tattoos, and this is to distract.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
This is to distract from the fact that at least here tonight, the people stealing from Americans are not folks with tattoos and hoodies. It's people wearing suits and ties and congressional pins sitting in this Capitol right now. Not in some random alley wrapped in darkness, but in the United States Congress wrapped in the flag. It is disgusting.
and we will never forget this. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, as I said in the point of order, which I didn't have the rule at hand, but it's 17(1)B, but as I said then, if they want to complain about they didn't like the process, if they don't like the bill, if there's a piece of the bill they don't like, save that for the debate on the bill itself. But instead, they've raised a parliamentary procedure to claim that the rule is not proper, assuming or claiming that there are earmarks. But I would submit, Mr. Speaker, that they have not mentioned an earmark yet. I've been listening. I've been wondering where it was because I've read the bill and I've read the manager's amendment. And with the manager's amendment, I see no earmarks in the bill. And they haven't brought it up, and I submit it's because they can't. And the proper ruling would be to rule that there aren't any earmarks. I understand we might have to take a vote, but let's try to get our processes right, Mr. Speaker. I would submit to everybody we ought to get the process right, and I yield back.
Yields back. Gentlelady from Indiana.
I reserve.
Reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Does the gentlelady have any more speakers?
We have one more speaker, Mr. Speaker.
I'll reserve them.
Oh.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Oh, I reserve. I'm prepared to close.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, this is everything that people hate about Washington. This bill is a tax scam that steals from the American people, and it is filled with earmarks. Earmarks to the gun lobby, earmarks to polluters to be able to exploit land, earmarks to every big donor that gives to the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. I mean, this is really about corruption. And this bill that they're trying to bring to the floor steals from regular people, takes away people's food benefits, throws people off of health care, and gives a big fat tax break to millionaires and billionaires. That is what their priorities are all about. So I would urge Democrats and Republicans who care about the integrity of this institution to vote no on considering the rule to block this terrible tax scam from coming to the floor today. We can do a hell of a lot better. This is a disgrace. With that, I yield back, and I urge a no vote.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is just a dilatory tactic by my colleagues across the aisle. We must continue so the House can begin consideration of this historic legislation and deliver on President Trump's agenda. I urge members to vote yes on the question, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. The question is, will the House now consider the resolution? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.